Greetings, Brookings Bio students. This is Mrs. Rydell, and in this PowerPoint video we are going to look at one of the other major problems that is facing our planet today, and that has to do with climate change. So we're going to talk about this vocab word first, something called the greenhouse effect. And the temperatures on our planet remain within a certain range that's suitable for life living on our planet because of our atmosphere. The atmosphere acts as a natural blanket to keep us warm. It insulates us. So the sun comes through the atmosphere and is trapped at the surface by those layers of the atmosphere, and it acts like a blanket. The atmosphere does that for us. It keeps the heat that the sun is sending to us near the surface, and it's called the greenhouse effect, named for that idea of a greenhouse. When the sun shines through the windows on the greenhouse, it's trapped inside. It allows the greenhouse to stay warm even when it's cold outside in the wintertime. You can grow plants inside because of this greenhouse effect. And the greenhouse effect itself is not a bad thing. It's important that we have that to maintain the temperatures on our planet and keep it a place where all living things can live. Where we get into trouble, though, is when we are changing the amount of those gases in the atmosphere that help to trap the heat. And we call those greenhouse gases, or the atmospheric gases that do that are carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, and those CFCs that we talked about that cause a problem for the ozone layer. These kinds of gases are found in the atmosphere, and they help to trap that heat, that greenhouse effect, to keep us warm. The problem comes when we increase these gases, so we start trapping more heat and more heat. There are some people who say the Earth is just in a cycle, that sometimes we're warmer, sometimes we're cooler. That whole climate change thing is just part of that natural cycle. Most scientists, though, today believe that we are increasing the global temperatures on the planet, and it is the result of human activities. We've increased the amount of carbon dioxide and some of those other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and it's causing the planet to hold more heat. In 2007 in Paris, there was a United Nations-backed panel of international scientists that got together to talk about this problem, and they basically issued a statement that said the climate is warming on our planet. We're getting warmer, there's no doubt about that, and there's a 90% probability that the causes have to do with what humans are doing to the planet. Either way, whether you want to believe that it's man-made, whether you want to believe it's part of the natural cycle of the planet, the truth is, the facts are, the science is, that the planet is getting warmer. What we do know: the global mean surface temperatures have increased between 0.5 and 1 degree since the late 19th century. We are getting warmer. And if you look at that, the 14 of the planet's warmest 15 years have all occurred since the year 2000. Last year, 2014, was the hottest year on record. The average temperature worldwide last year was almost a full degree above the 1960 to 1990 average, 0.05 above the 2001 to 2010 average. So we are gradually increasing the temperatures on the planet. So if you look at the trend, since we've been taking temperatures and recording temperatures, there has been a slow, if you look at the average, an average temperature on the planet has gradually increased. We are getting warmer. That's a scientific fact. Things that we know. The science says that the snow cover in the northern hemisphere on the floating ice in the Arctic Ocean has gone down. Snow cover is decreasing. We can see that from photographs. If you compare, here's the same place before and after 1941, a huge glacier here. In 2004, that glacier is now a lake. We see the melting of the ice caps all around on our planet, and we can measure how much ice, the mass of ice on our planet, it is steadily decreasing. That's a fact. We also know that those greenhouse gases, those ones that cause the planet to hold heat are also gradually increasing in the atmosphere. We can see those go up in numbers. Carbon dioxide is increasing, methane is increasing. The greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have increased steadily. We can measure them. That is a fact. The science is that we do have more greenhouse gases in our atmosphere now. So cause of climate change. What the scientists are saying is causing this is a number of things. But remember, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So anything that we do that burns something to produce carbon dioxide is going to increase the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere and have an impact on the global climate. So burning anything, fossil fuels, we talked about coal, oil, natural gas, wood, anything that we're burning is going to increase in carbon dioxide output into the atmosphere. Even producing and transporting those fossil fuels, it takes energy to do that, to dig them out of the ground, to transport them where they're going to be processed, the factories that make them. Decomposition, and when we're breaking down dead things as part of those cycles, some of this is a natural part of the process of the planet. Animal sources releases methane into the atmosphere. Methane is a gas that's produced by organisms. Deforestation is something that humans do that impacts the carbon dioxide. Remember, when plants do photosynthesis, they remove carbon dioxide from the air. So if we are cutting down trees, if we're cutting down, removing vegetation from the planet, we're paving over green places. There are fewer plants doing photosynthesis, and that means less carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. That means carbon dioxide, more carbon dioxide staying in the atmosphere. So some of these things we can't really do anything about, but some of these things we can make a big difference. So the question would be, what's so bad about warming up a little bit? We just came through a very cold time in South Dakota. We're usually freezing here in the winter. We have wind chills down below in the -20s, below zero. And so freezing temperatures is, we would say, here, let's warm up a little bit. What's so bad about a degree increase in temperature? And the problem with that is that increasing the temperature on our planet, the average overall temperature, causes a lot of very negative problems for our ecosystems. So what's so bad about warming up a little bit? One of the things that happen when you warm the oceans and melt the ice caps is you have more water in the oceans, and that causes coastal flooding. You can kind of see the cartoons making fun of that, of where is our coastline going to be. But as we melt those ice caps and put that water into the ocean, we are going to see rises in the water levels along our coastlines. What's so bad about warming up just a little bit? Having a change in the Gulf Stream. One of the things that brings us the weather that keeps us warm is bringing warm ocean water through something called the Gulf Stream. There are currents in the ocean. They bring them up from the equator where the temperatures are warmer. The water flows in a big cycle. It moves along our coastline, bringing warmer temperatures here. It's one of the reasons why England has the temperature that it has, even though it's up very high north. It's because of that Gulf Stream bringing warm water up, and it cycles. As it gets colder and reaches those northern latitudes, it sinks below, and it's moving nutrients, it's cycling nutrients in the ocean, it's bringing warmth to those countries. And if we add cold water to our oceans, we can impact that flow of the Gulf Stream. And in past histories, in times of ice ages, that Gulf Stream has actually shut down, making it much colder on the planet. What's so bad about warming up a little? If you are warming your oceans, warming water makes more evaporation, and more evaporation going into the atmosphere means more severe storms. We've had a huge increase in the numbers of hurricanes every year in the last few years, and a great increase in the severity of those hurricanes. We had Hurricane Katrina, huge impact on southern United States and the Gulf areas. We are seeing more severe storms. What's so bad about warming up a little bit? Weather extremes. When we talk about, well, it's cold in South Dakota, it can't be global warming because we're having cold and it's snowing here. We're talking about overall average on the planet. And if it's cold somewhere else, that means it's warm somewhere if the average temperature is going up. And we see weather extremes, heat waves, drought in a lot of areas. The western United States has been in a drought for several years. Even South Dakota, the water availability has been down in the last couple of years. And it causes severe weather in lots of places. What's so bad about warming up a little bit? If we are changing what climate is like in different ecosystems, it affects impacts the animals, the organisms that live there. It means loss of species. We talked about humans changing habitats and causing a loss of biodiversity, and that's going to be a result of warming the planet and making places that were cooler now warmer. What's so bad about warming up a little bit? Putting carbon dioxide into our atmosphere affects the acidification of our oceans. When we have carbon dioxide, remember in our cycles that we drew, carbon cycle, having atmosphere touch surface water allows for those gases to dissolve in the water. So if you have more carbon dioxide in your atmosphere, that means more carbon dioxide in the oceans. And you know what acid does, a little bit of acid. We talked about acid rain. Remember we did that experiment with the in transport chapter when we soaked the eggs in vinegar to release the calcium from their shells and make them squishy. Adding acid to our oceans impacts the ocean ecosystem and the animals that use calcium to build their bodies and build their homes. We're losing our coral reefs in Florida Keys. We're losing them in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef. Animals that require calcium to build their shells, mollusks, different kinds of shellfish, are being affected by increase in acid of our oceans. Okay, so remember we talked about the Montreal Protocol, and we saw that problem with the ozone layer thinning, and the countries get together and say, there's a problem here. The scientists say this is what's the cause, this is what's going on, and the countries get together and agree to, let's do something about this, and they all agree and work together. And a similar thing happened when we're talking about global climate change. There was an agreement, an international meeting. The meeting was in Japan in a city called Kyoto, and there was an agreement that was met. The international delegates from all around the world sent people to the meeting, and the aim this time was reducing the global warming problem, bringing back down the temperature. What can we do? And participants were asked to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to a certain percentage. We said we're going to cut back greenhouse gases, and there were targets that were set for different countries to reach. And the aim was by 2012 we were going to cut back on greenhouse gases, just like we did with the CFCs, and we worked on together to bring back those levels back down and help the ozone hole. 37 industrialized countries, including the United States, were there at the meeting, agreed that they were going to cut down on greenhouse gases. The U.S. target was to decrease by 7% the gases we are putting out there. And all these countries signed the agreement. It's called the Kyoto Accord, just like we had Montreal Protocol for fixing the ozone depletion. This was supposed to fix the global warming problem. The problem is that not everybody stuck to the agreement. Originally, the United States signed on to the agreement. This was when Bill Clinton was president. Came back to the United States and Congress approved the treaty, and then we changed presidents, we changed governments, we changed our attitude about the climate. And when George Bush became president, he said we are not going to follow Kyoto. United States is the only major industrial country that did not sign the Kyoto Accord. We signed it and then we took it back. The standards that were set by Kyoto expired in 2012. We're past that now. And countries have been meeting since that time, since 2009, to decide what we are going to do next. And basically, we cannot agree on anything. Some countries have already declared that they're not going to follow their commitments to Kyoto and reduce emissions. Developing countries have increased carbon emissions by a huge percentage. Delegates from different countries have met several times to talk about this, but no agreement has been reached, and basically all we have agreed to is to keep talking. Some countries say there's not going to be a deal anytime, at least until 2020. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of carbon footprint. That's a vocab word. Carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gas, GHG. Remember we talked about all those greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane. The amount of greenhouse gases that are put into the atmosphere by a person, an organization, an event, something. There are website links that allow you to calculate your personal carbon footprint. How is the carbon dioxide that you are putting out based on the things that you do affecting the planet? You can go to this little website and try the calculator. Right now, the United States is no longer the #1 carbon dioxide emitter. We used to be #1. We were the one putting out the most carbon dioxide of any country. China has taken over as the #1 emitter of carbon dioxide in the world, and it's because they are running factories to make products that they sell to the rest of the world. So instead of making it here and producing our own carbon dioxide, we're just shifting where those products are made, and we're contributing to the problem. So even if you do not believe in global warming, if you don't think that the planet humans are causing this increase in temperature, even if the countries can't agree on emission levels, we should still be working to reduce our emissions of those greenhouse gases for a number of reasons. The things that we do that will fix climate change make sense for a variety of other reasons. Fossil fuels are a limited resource. Remember, that it takes millions of years to produce new fossil fuels, and eventually they are going to run out. We are not going to have fossil fuels to provide our energy. We need to be looking at what are we going to do next. The things we do to fix climate change make sense because a lot of the fossil fuel that we depend on to run our factories, to make our electricity, to run our cars, is coming from countries that are not friendly to the United States. Buying gas, and that money is going to countries that are funding terrorists. That is a reason why we should get off the fossil fuels. If we depend on other countries that are not our friends, they can hold back on gas production. They can basically hold us hostage and make us pay whatever we want, disrupt our economy, because we are dependent on them for fossil fuels. Things we do to fix climate change make sense because drilling and transporting fossil fuels has negative environmental consequences. We recently heard in the news about train derailments carrying oil. We have oil spills from pipelines. If you think about the idea of drilling for oil, drilling for natural gas, digging coal, all of those things have serious environmental consequences to ecosystems. Things we do to get off the fossil fuels and fix climate change makes sense because drilling and transporting, if you think about pipeline leaks, other sorts of things, the oil companies are raking in record profits, and what's paying for those profits is damage to our ecosystem. The things we do to fix climate change make sense for other reasons. We often kind of go in these cycles where we want to get off the fossil fuels. We have a major accident, the BP oil spill in the Gulf in 2011, pipeline breaks. We start saying, no, we should not be drilling. Let's cut back on the drilling. Let's find other sources. And then we change around and kind of forget about it. Drill, baby, drill. We should be not dependent on foreign oil. Let's find it in our own country. Let's drill our own in our own wildlife refuges in Alaska. Let's go for the tar sands thing. we seem to kind of go back and forth on this depending on how long it's been since our last environmental disaster. Things we do to fix climate change makes sense because coming up with alternative energy, putting money into alternative energy sources, solar, wind power, tidal power, not only is it going to be good for environment because we're not putting the pollution out there, we're not increasing the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, but we are providing jobs and innovation, new technologies to do things in other ways to replace those fossil fuels that are going to run out anyways. So let's think about it. We kind of have some dueling scenarios here. We can kind of keep doing what we're doing, don't do anything basically to change our ways, or we could work to get off the fossil fuels. Those are kind of our choices. We need to come up with alternatives, or we just keep doing the same old, same old. And depending on the consequences of those kind of depend on whether the scientists are right about this man-made climate change thing or whether they're wrong. So let's look at the possibilities. What if we keep doing what we're doing, which is basically nothing to fix this? And the scientists are right. There is man-made climate change. What we are doing is putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We're causing environmental damage. The consequences of those two things together are too awful for our planet to even think about. That is a really bad choice. What if we keep doing what we are doing? What if we don't change? And the scientists are wrong. It's not our fault. It's just part of the natural cycle. We are still going to have those other problems that are associated with burning fossil fuels. Pollution, acid rain, messing up our dependence on our enemies. Even if we don't get off the fossil fuels and the scientists are wrong, we're still going to have pollution. We're still going to have some bad consequences. Okay, so what if we work to get off the fossil fuels? We change, we come up with alternative energy, we're working to cut down our carbon dioxide emissions, we're working on saving fuel, recycling, all those things that are good for the planet. And the scientists are wrong. It's not our fault. We're still going to solve other problems. All of those things that go with damage to the ecosystem, running out of fossil fuels, dependence on enemies, are all fixed by getting off the fossil fuels, even if it doesn't impact the climate change thing. The best scenario, the scientists are right. We work to get off fossil fuels, and that could really change things around it. Not only fixes the climate change thing, but it also fixes all these other problems that are associated with burning fossil fuels. It's a win-win situation. So what can we do to help with this? Watch out for our own carbon footprint. If we are not going to, as a country, as a world, get together to come up with targets and cut back on, each individual person can do something to cut back on the carbon dioxide that we are putting out. Cut down on activities that use fossil fuels. Drive automobiles with increased efficiency or alternative fuels. We have hybrids, and we're working on electric cars now and other kinds of ways to provide energy. Even if we don't agree and come up with a new accord to replace Kyoto, countries can still work to cut down their carbon dioxide emissions. Recycling, remember, if we're always uses less energy than starting from scratch if we are going from something that's already made and recycling those components. Reducing deforestation. Remember, plants use carbon dioxide when they do their photosynthesis thing. So if we leave the trees, if we keep more green on our planet, it's going to actually remove some of those the carbon dioxide that's in our atmosphere. It's good for the planet. We need to think about this and vote for leaders that are supporting environmental issues. If this is important to you, you need to write your representatives. Tell them what you think. Tell them you are in favor of doing things that protect the planet. And vote for people and put them in office that are going to represent you and the things that you want. We need to develop a national energy policy that emphasizes alternative energy and conservation. We have never, ever, ever had that. We need to support funding for research on environmental issues and alternative energy production. Put money into developing these alternatives to burning fossil fuels. We need to encourage innovation and new ideas and technology solutions. We need smart people working on this problem. We need the future generation to come up with solutions to fix this. We are going to stop right there and talk about our last big issue that faces the planet in our next slideshow. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.